Watch out for what you want, they say. I always found it silly. I wished with every fiber of my being, bored of married woman. I wanted to get out of the routine, feel that cold in the belly that we forget that there is. And then, on a sunny Sunday, my desire knocked on the door. Literally, it had a name, surname, and a scrutiny smile that, let us face it, was family. My nephew. He arrived with an innocent proposal, an escape game. I would be the prisoner, blindfolded, and he would be my jailer. The idea was that I guessed the objects he would pass on to me. Little did he know that the only game that was happening there was mine, and that, tied and blind, I've never been so in control. The truth is that he tied me to a challenge and I had no intention of escaping. By the way, I twisted, prayed, never finding the key. What would you do in my place? Comment down here and already subscribe to the channel so as not to lose the unfolding of this story. That Sunday started like everyone else. My husband, Ricardo, was on the couch, glazed in football, grunting to television. The smell of fresh coffee hovered in the air, mixed with the boredom of a 10-year marriage that had already lost the taste completely. It was a happy family picture for those who saw from the outside, but inside it looked like a black and white movie. The bell rang and the color returned to my world the moment I opened the door. It was Leo, my nephew, son of Ricardo's sister. He was in his early 20s, that kind of youth that looks like an insult to those who have passed the 30s. He came in with that wide smile, gave me a long hug, a little longer than normal. His scent was woody young, unlike the smell of emotional naphthalene emanating from my husband on the couch. "Aunt, you're getting more and more beautiful," he said, close to my ear. I smiled, thanked, and felt that warm up the back of the neck. Was it a flirt? Probably. A harmless flirting that happened whenever he was visiting us. But that day there was something different in the air. An electricity. Ricardo barely greeted him, absorbed in the game. Better that way. We had all afternoon just for us, talking in the kitchen while I was preparing lunch. We talked about his college, about life, and with every exchange of glances, I felt a growing tension, an invisible line being stretched among us. I knew I was playing with fire. But frankly, I was freezing inside so long that a little heat seemed exactly what I needed. It was after lunch, with the dishes already on the machine and Ricardo snoring loudly on the couch, which he threw the bait. We were on the porch, and the silence was comfortable but loaded with possibilities. "Aunt," he began, with a tone of voice that was a perfect mix of mischief and seriousness, "do you trust me?" The question took me by surprise. I looked deep into his eyes, trying to decipher what was behind that good boy facade. "It depends, nephew." "What?" He laughed, a low laugh delicious to hear. "My friends and I are addicted to these escape room games, you know? But I thought about creating a different." He leaned a little, and the world seemed to be smaller, restricted to both of us. "The idea is simple. I see you. I tie your wrists. Not tight, just so you don't use your hands. And then I pass some objects in you, and you have to guess what they are. Only with the tact, with the skin." My heart jumped. The proposal was absurd, indecent, dangerous, and the most exciting thing I had heard in years. I should have said no. It should have laughed, called him crazy, and changed the subject. But the bored woman inside me, the woman, hungry for a spark of life, just smiled. "And what is the prize if I won?" I asked, entering his game, or rather in mine. He looked at me in a way that made me hold my breath and said, "We find out at the end." I agreed. Of course, I agreed. We went to the guest room, a room that was never used, and suddenly turned into our private stage. He took a silk scarf I had, one I wore around my neck. The choice of object was once a provocation. As he tied the sail over my eyes, his fingers brushed my skin, a deliberately slow touch. The world disappeared. The pitch has taken over. But instead of fear, I felt a wave of anticipation. Vision, all my other senses were on a state of alert. I listened to his breathing nearby. I smelled the smell of your perfume mixed with mine. The air of the room seemed denser, heavier. Then I felt the soft touch of another tape, probably of satin, wrapping my wrists, joining them in front of my body. The knot was loose, theatrical. I could let go any time if I wanted to. But the point was exactly that. I didn't want to. Being there, vulnerable, delivered, was a choice. The fantasy of being helpless was my biggest weapon at that time. "Ready, Aunt?" he whispered, his voice a velvety sound in the darkness. I just nodded, unable to formulate a word. My whole body was a great receiver waiting for the next stimulus. Every poro of my skin was awake, each nervous termination tingling. The game was about to start, and I already felt the big winner. It's because I was living that dot. The first touch was on my arm. It was cold, smooth, and left a damp trail. The initial shock made me panting. I said, the voice coming out a little trembling. "He got it right," he answered, and I could feel the smile in his voice. He slowly slid the ice cube down my forearm. Rising to his shoulder, the contrast between the cold of ice and the heat of my skin was crazy. Every drop that dripped was delicious torture. It was a simple ice cube, something trivial, but in that context was the most erotic thing I had ever felt. Then came something incredibly light, almost imperceptible. A ghost caressing that traveled my collarbone, down my lap. He shivered. Every inch of my body. "A pity," I whispered, and heard him agree. He was pity on my cheek, my chin, my lips. It was an innocent touch, but my imagination turned him into something forbidden, intimate. I was stuck in my own darkness, with my free mind to paint the most lewd scenes. He continued with some more objects. The cold and metallic tip of a key walking down my hand. The soft bristles of a makeup brush climbing down my leg over my pants. Every hit of mine was followed by a low compliment of it, which only increased complicity between us. He was testing my limits, and I silently encouraged him to go further. The innocent part of the game was clearly coming to an end, and I could barely wait for what would come next. The border between the game and the reality began to be blurred. He not only passed the objects, he created a choreography on my skin. The ice was no longer just ice. It was an instrument that drew circles on my belly over my blouse, making the fabric thin stick to me. The pity was not just a pity. It was the perfect excuse for exploring the sensitivity of my neck, the area behind my ear, places that made me squirm in a way that I didn't even remember to be able anymore. I was completely at the mercy of sensations. With each new touch, I tried to decipher not only the object, but the intention behind it. And the intention was getting clearer and clearer. There was no more hurry to guess. The silence between one object and another was extended, filled only by the sound of our breaths, which were no longer so calm. I could feel him approaching, the warmth of his body near mine. At one point, he slid something soft and warm through my thigh. I hesitated. It was not an object. It was his hand. But the rule was to guess objects. It was a protocol break. "This is not worth," I said, trying to sound reproduced, but my voice failed, leaving more as an invitation. "It hasn't guided what it is yet," he replied, his voice as hoarse near my ear, completely ignoring my false objection. That was the moment, the turning point. Innocence, if ever existed, had evaporated from the room. And then the game is over. Or rather, it turned. I expected the next object, the next texture. But what came was different. I felt a hot breath on the side of my neck. My whole body stiffened. I waited. And then the touch. A moist, hot, smooth touch. Kiss. A slow, time-consuming kiss right at the junction between my shoulder and my neck. A violent shiver traveled. My pimple and a low moan escaped my lips before I could contain it. The sail prevented me from seeing, but I could feel every millimeter of that mouth on my skin. "What object is this, Aunt?" he whispered against my skin, and the provocation in his voice was almost palpable. My brain stopped working. There was no further guess. There were no more rules. There was only the instinct. He distributed more kisses, rising through my jugular, stopping dangerously near my ear. Each kiss was a promise. A chapter of a story that was being written directly on my body. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He was lost in that sea of prohibited sensations. My head crashed to the side, giving him more access. A silent and unequivocal invitation. Me, the married aunt. He, the nephew. In that dark room, we were only two bodies responding to an attraction that was too strong to ignore. The ties on my wrists, which were once a game prop, now seemed the perfect symbol of my surrender. A surrender I wanted with all my strength. His boldness grew up with my silence. If the kisses were the breaking of the rules, what came next was to tear the instruction book and burn the pages. I felt his hands on the bar of my shirt. They hesitated for a moment, one last second of sanity perhaps, but it was just a moment. Slowly, He slid his hands under the fabric, and the contact of his hot skin directly on mine was like an electric shock. It was the first time we touched like this, skin with skin. His hands were large, firm. Explored my back, going slowly, around my spine, making every nerve of my body scream. I raised my back, handing myself to the touch. It was wrong. Oh, heavens, how was it wrong? And how good it was. It was the antithesis of everything my marriage had become. Mechanical, predictable, without passion. That touch was uncertain, dangerous, and loaded with an electricity that made me feel alive. He moved his hands to my waist, his thumbs drawing circles on my skin. I could feel my heart hitting out of control against my ribs, the sound echoing in my ears. My breath was panting, short. I was completely vulnerable, blindfolded with my hands tied, and his body exploring me freely. And in the midst of all that, whirlwind, a clear thought formed in my mind. That was exactly where I wanted to be. I wouldn't fight, not shout. I wouldn't escape. I would surrender. At the height of that tension, when my body was about to dispose, he stopped. His hands rested at my waist. The kisses ceased. The sudden silence was more deafening than any noise. What happened? Did I do something wrong? Did the guilt finally hit? 1,000 questions went through my blindfolded mind in a single second. I felt his body move a little away, and a cold traveled the places he had just touched. "Aunt," he began to say, but his voice was no longer the hoarse and seductive voice of before. There was a different tone, K-tone that I couldn't identify. He approached my ear again, but this time it was not to kiss me. His breath was hot, but the words that came out were like a bucket of cold water. "I need to tell you something." My body, which seconds before it was soft and delivered, was rigid. I felt a knot form in my stomach. That was not good. The atmosphere of the room has completely changed. That heat, that electricity dissipated, giving way to a sharp coldness, a sense of omen. Then he whispered the words that would change everything. The words that were to be my ruin. "This is not a game," he said, the low and serious voice. "At least not the game you think it's." I remained silent, immovable. The world under my sail had stopped spinning. My brain processed his words in slow motion. "It's not a game." I waited, knowing that the final blow was yet to come. He took a deep breath, as if he took the courage to unravel the stab. "Ricardo," he started, and my husband's name sounded like a poison in the air. "He's suspicious of you. He thinks you would betray him at the first opportunity." My heart did not accelerate. On the contrary, it seemed to be calm, cold. I kept silent, forcing him to continue, to give me the full sentence. His voice was loaded with a false regret. "He paid me, Aunt. He paid me to come here today to create this situation, to seduce you, to test you." He paused, waiting for my reaction, waiting for the cry, the scream, the despair, hoping me to get the sale and slap him. He wanted to know if you would give in, and he's recording everything. His camera there in the corner. The final revelation, the complete humiliation. My husband, the man with whom I shared the bed for a decade, had reduced me to that A test. It's an object of distrust to be proved and filmed by the nephew himself. Leo was waiting for my collapse. He expected to see the betrayed, humiliated, destroyed woman. But he didn't know the woman behind that sale, while Leo was waiting for my explosion of pain and fury. Something unexpected happened in the darkness of my blindfolded world. A smile. It started in the corners of my mouth and slowly spread, a genuine, satisfied, almost victorious smile. He couldn't see, of course. For him, I was still the statue of shock and humiliation. But inside, a laugh bubbled. "Test you." The irony was so delicious that I had to hold on to not laugh out loud. My silence made him uncomfortable. "Aunt, are you okay? Speak something?" The concern in his voice was the most false thing I had ever heard. He wasn't worried about me. He was concerned about the consequences of what I had done. Poor little. So young, so manipulable. A perfect piece on the board. I took a deep breath, not to contain the tears, but to taste the moment. The air never looked so sweet. The smell of his perfume, which was once exciting, was now the smell of victory. I lifted my tied hands, a slow and deliberate gesture, and with my fingertips started pulling the knot of the sale. I was going to take the sale, yes, Kay, but not like the victim. I was going to get her out like the queen who was about to check the check. It was time for the Real game to start. The light invaded my eyes as the silk scarf finally fell. I blinked a few times to get used to the clarity, and the first thing I focused was Leo's face. He was pale, with an expression of anxiety and guilt. Behind him, on the bookcase, the small, red light of a spy camera blinked exactly where I knew it was. I fixed my gaze on his. My face was serene, calm. The smile I hid under the sail was now showing him to see. "Leo, Leo," I said with a soft, almost maternal voice, which seemed to confuse him even more. "Do you really think I didn't know?" The color disappeared completely from his face. He stepped back as if my words had physically hit him. "What? What do you mean? You think your uncle is a crime genius? Ricardo is predictable, sloppy. He speaks sleeping, you know?" I started to untie the knot of my wrists without haste, and he leaves his cell phone unlocked on the table. "I saw the messages from both of you for 3 days. Every detail of the plan. The proposal of the game, the camera, the money he offered you." I got up, and suddenly I was the tallest and highest person in that room. He was just a scared boy. "The only surprise for me," I continued, walking toward him, "was you accepted to be his puppy so easily. The truth is that my marriage was not just warm, was dead and buried. And I knew why. For months I had suspected. It's a cell phone. Always. Turned down the meetings until late. The smell of a different female perfume on his shirts. Ricardo was a terrible traitor. His distrust about me was not intuition, was projection. He thought I would do with him what he was already doing. To me, confirmation came on a Tuesday night. He arrived late, drunk, and overturned in bed. And in the middle of the night, he grunted a name. A name that was not mine. That was the night when I'm mourning my wedding is over and the cold and calculating anger took over. I wasn't going to make a scandal. It wasn't going to cry. I was going to serve revenge on a plate he would never forget. I spent the following weeks gathering tests, documenting everything, and then the universe gave me the perfect gift. At dawn, I heard his cell phone whistle. He was in the bath. I went to look, and there was the conversation. His disgusting plan with his nephew to test me. At that moment, I knew. His plan became my plan. The trap he set up for me became the stage of his own ruin. I no longer needed to prove his betrayal. I would make him surrender, with him to hang himself with his own rope he so carefully prepared. Sunday could not arrive. Fast enough, I walked to the shelf and took the small camera. The red light stopped blinking when I turned it off. I looked at Leo, who was shrunken near the door looking for an cornered animal. "You were just a pawn, dear. It's a tool, and I must admit, a very efficient tool." My smile widened. "You played perfectly. Every touch, every kiss. It was all very convincing. I think Ricardo will love the recording. Too bad it is not the recording he was expecting." I showed him my cell phone. Opened an audio file. "Well, your uncle paid you to film." Me, I was recording something else. I squeezed the play. Ricardo's voice echoed through the room. A crystalline recording of one of his telephone conversations with his lover. He's planning the weekend that would spend together as soon as he got proof to blame me in divorce and not divide the goods. Leo's chin fell. "See? The game was different," he explained, turning off the recording. "The goal was not to test my fidelity, but to expose his rot. And you, my dear nephew, helped me create the perfect scenario of humiliation. You helped him dig his own grave." I walked to him and put the spy camera in his hand. "Now, I think you should take this to your uncle. Tell him that the test was a success, and that I want divorce. Oh, and my lawyers will get in touch soon." Leo left the room without saying a word, looking 10 years older. I never knew exactly how his conversation was with Ricardo, but I can imagine. I imagine the triumph on the face of mine, now ex-husband, turning into horror when he realized that the trap had closed around him, that the test he created for me, in fact, tested and disapproved his character, his nephew loyalty, and their intelligence. He underestimated me. He thought I was just the good and passive wife he displayed as a trophy. In the end, the question that remains is, who was really tested? The woman who was pushed into a temptation situation and used her to break free? Nephew who sold his own family for a handful of money? Or the traitorous husband who devised a nasty plan to go over and ended up in the bottom? That Sunday started as the day of my humiliation and ended as the first day of my new life. And as for the game, well, I won. And the prize. my freedom. And that, my friends, has a much, much more tasty flavor than any stolen kiss or forbidden touch. It is the sweet taste of revenge and a future where the only strings are the ones I choose myself to put.